I'd like to welcome to the show director of the upcoming Amazon original film Coming to America, Mr. Craig Brewer. How are you today, sir?
I am good, sir. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. You're in Memphis, right?
I am, and as evidenced by my T-shirt that I would love to say that I wore for this occasion, but really, in the time of COVID, I don't think I've worn anything else. I just keep wearing T-shirts.
We're the
My
same
daughter
hoodie.
my daughter was like, "Dad, didn't you wear that
Yeah.
yesterday?" I was like, "Oh, honey, this has been this week's shirt."
I
Yeah, I
swear
know.
to
I
God,
know
you're the same
you've.
thing.
I know you have a history with Sundance, and that's what Ricky and I've been doing the past week. So it's staying up late, going to bed, waking up, just going right back at it, not
Yeah,
changing nothing. At
I,
least for me.
yeah, I've been seeing all. It's been wild to watch how they've been doing Sundance during COVID, and
Hmm.
it's just really wild because I sometimes think about that experience that I had, and I just wonder, I wonder if that's ever going to happen again. And I don't mean in relation to like, oh, nothing could top Hustle and Flow. That's not what I mean by that. It's just like there was this time where you dreamed about taking your movie to Sundance, and then there was somebody would buy it, and then your career would start. And I was really fortunate that that exact dream scenario happened to me. But I'm just questioning whether we completely live in that world anymore, even with or without the whole pandemic.
Hmm.
So it's interesting whenever I hear about things that are coming out of Sundance, or that excitement that someone saw something at Sundance or something really took off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, like personally, like we watched a bunch of films and like we were talking about earlier, I rewatched on the count of three and we are like, has this not been bought yet? It's been crazy because the amount of films that have not been bought, like I think there's only maybe a handful that have been purchased so far
Hmm.
coming out of Sundance. And that's kind of like the different by now, I think like we're at the end of Sundance, films are winning awards from Sundance. Like a lot of these would have already been picked up pre pandemic.
Yeah, and well, I think what happens is, and I watched it firsthand, is that there really is a party excitement that happens at Sundance, which it shouldn't be discounted because of the kind of atmosphere that going to a movie theater is like. There's an excitement that happens in the room where buyers for studios and distributors are like, we got to have that movie. That movie's like perfect for what we need to do, and or what we can sell. Um, I don't know if that same type of party atmosphere is happening or not. I could be wrong. I haven't been like following it all that much, but I mean, I remember everybody passing on Hustle and Flow when John Singleton and Stephanie Lane was taking it around town. But to watch the bidding war of Hustle and Flow happen at Sundance after a spectacular, like, I mean, I've bumped into so many people that said I was in the room that night when Hustle premiered for the first time, and it was electric. I mean, I've never experienced anything quite like it since, and I think that had a lot to do with the fact that it sold for such a big it's had such a big sale, and then just a lot of buzz off of it. And I just wonder if that's still happening.
Yeah, because if you think about that, like you, even as a film person, like I just sit there, I'm like, man, that moment would have been like a standing ovation, right? You know what I mean? Like at home, I'm like watching, I'm like, man, that was a moment, right? And that's the collective like roar of the crowd of saying hey, that's a great film. Like even with Hustle and Flow, like I mean, that's still one of my all-time favorite movies. It is. It's just it's a great film. I've never I don't think personally I've ever seen anything like that film since that film, and it blows my mind still. And I told you like off the air before we joined, I was like I could talk about Hustle and Flow for probably 5,000 hours, but I don't want to take all your time tonight. So,
I never
but
get tired of talking about that movie. It's been on my mind a lot lately, just with John passing, and just I'm now in a time in my life where I've got I got a 19-year-old son who is really into Memphis rap, and he'll get in my car sometimes, and I'll just tell him DJ, just go on your phone and DJ what we're listening to, I'd be like, man, who is this? And he'll bring up some rapper, some local Memphis rapper, and I was just like, man, I don't know any of these cats. You know, I thought I knew everybody back in the day with like 3 6 and you know, and Yo Gotti, but now like there's a whole new group, you know, that's coming up, and it's just made me think like, you know, it just never goes away. There's still going to be cats that are going into their own home studios and making music, you know, any way that they can, and it just keeps happening over and over again every new generation.
I love it.
What like got you into filmmaking? What got you into films? You know, was there a specific film? Was it just the essence of making film, or what was kind of that like factor that you said that made you say, I want to do this?
Raiders of the Lost Ark. That was the big moment for me, and it's kind of fun. You know, Jake, we found out we're related, and so this is another cousin of yours. So this is my mom, Gail. Her and my dad, who were both from Rossville, Tennessee, or Fisherville, Tennessee, which is where Marv Thornberry is from. They made a point to try to get out of Tennessee. You know, they just were young and idealistic, and they wanted to move away. And so we lived in California for a lot of my childhood, in Northern California, in a place called Vallejo. And I remember we didn't really have a lot of money. You know, my dad was just starting his new job out. You know, he was in the Army, so we traveled around a lot. And me and all my buddies, I can't remember. You know, I may have been like, you know, first or second grade, right around there. But like, me and my buddies were really into Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I was just absolutely hell bent on being an archaeologist because it looked so sexy. You know, you got to hang out with Miriam and kill Nazis, and just, to me, that's what archaeology was all about. You know, it wasn't, you know, hours and hours on your knees, you know, dusting things and then going, I can see that this is obviously from the crustacean area of it. You know, it's like, no, it was Harrison Ford swinging from the Well of Souls. So I remember this moment, but I had all my friends over, and I was like, "Are you all coming to my birthday party?" They're like, "Yeah." And then I said, "And we're gonna have a Raiders of the Lost Ark cake." And this was news to my mom. She did not know about this. And now looking back, I can kind of know what was happening, which is like, I mean, I'm a parent myself, like where I've been put in these situations, like, well, what the hell is a Raiders of the Lost Ark cake? Like, you know, is she gonna have to make like a Ark of the Covenant and cover it with gold frosting? I mean, like, what is a Raiders of the Lost Ark cake? So I sometimes get emotional thinking about this because I can just see my mom, you know, young, first time mom, and you know, what am I going to do? And like, my kid just announced it to all these other kids. And so it was the big moment, you know, for let's all sing happy birthday. And my mom brings out this cake, and it's a basic rectangular pan cake. You know, the kind you put it in the pan and then you flip it over and then you just cover it in frosting.
Yeah.
It was the most boring looking rectangle cake with blue icing. I'll never forget that blue icing that you ever seen. But covered in saran wrap and laying perfectly on top of it was something that I had never experienced yet, which was, and you can probably still find this on eBay, and I would highly recommend you get it if you can find it. But it was the Raiders of the Lost Ark script and storyboard booklet that had a fantastic cover on the front of it, but it was laying there on top of the cake. And I was just like, what is this? And so we blew out the candles and we all took it out. And I remember kind of like me going like, what is this? What is this book? Like, what is this tome of, and my dad and my mom telling me, it's like, this is how movies get made. Somebody wrote all the dialogue. And I'm like, I know, I know this line. I remember when he said that line. I remember when she said that line. Oh my God, there's the line, you know? But then there were these storyboards in it, you know, and it had the whole truck scene figured out, you know? And I just remember being obsessed with this book and this booklet. And then eventually the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, which was a big move. So, and that triggered a bunch of other, like, it was the early days of film nerd for not only myself, but I think for a lot of film nerds, you know, because you could rent movies in the 80s, and then movie magazines like Starlog and you know, I mean, it was just, you could find each other. You knew, are you into movies? Do you know about Starlog? You know, I remember the first time, not to go on a tangent here, but I remember reading, and I have often wanted to find this Starlog, because I remember reading that there was like a story that George Lucas had long ago about Anakin Skywalker. This is before the prequels, like way before. I think this is before Empire Strikes Back came out, where he was talking about how Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker were fighting on a volcano, and they both fell in, and one came out, and that was all that was said. So I remember that being teased like very early on. So then when, you know, the big reveal happened, I was like, oh my God, I read that in Starlog. So there was a wave of sudden, like, my dad was like interested in how movies were made, but he was also really interested in movies. So it was a film festival around my house. And so, like, on the same day that, like, my dad would maybe rent Chariots of Fire, he also rented Kentucky Fried Movie, because we saw Michael Jackson and John Landis talking about Kentucky Fried Movie in the making of Thriller that he had rented the week before. So it's like, my poor little sister, you know, she's in there. I don't know if you've ever seen Kentucky Fried Movie, but it's hilarious and completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
But there's this one skit called Catholic High School Girls in Trouble. And I've never seen so much nudity and humor at the same time. And so, like, there I am watching like this very restrained British movie about, you know, running and through the waves with Vangelis playing in the background, followed, you know, by Catholic High School Girls in Trouble. And you couldn't help but just be inspired every day, you know? So that's really like when I first started thinking about being in movies. And then I was, you know, my granddad, as you know, was a famous baseball player. So, and then because I come from Tennessee, everybody's like really like crazy about the Vols, and my dad went to UT and everything like that. So there's tons of pictures, baby pictures of me dressed up in orange with, you know, a football jersey or something like that. And so I was expected to do sports, but I was terrible at it. And so way that I could really meet girls was to go into children's theater. And so I just was raised acting in shows and sometimes writing skits and doing a lot of improv. And then that just kind of led to me writing plays in high school. And then eventually writing and directing, like sometimes acting in one-man shows and stuff like that in the Bay Area. And then when my granddad Marv died and my other granddad Gene died on like the same, like basically a year and a half apart from each other, I decided it was time for me to move back to Memphis, and I moved into my grandmother's house and then started making movies on a video camera, you know, back in the mid 90s.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, well, speaking, you know, from making video cameras in the mid 90s to, you know, now you're about to do Coming to America, a sequel of probably one of the most well-known, at least from what I've seen, comedy films, and especially Eddie Murphy. You know, speaking of Eddie Murphy, you just got done doing a movie with him, Dolomite Is My Name. And I feel like that kind of put him back on the map after a few years where he was kind of stagnant. You know, when did you meet and how did you meet Eddie Murphy? And, you know, how did that come into place and kind of how did that work into doing Coming to America?
Well, I've had a long relationship working with Paramount Pictures, and there was for a moment a time where Paramount was really wanting to get heavily into animation, and there was a project that the then head of the studio, Adam Goodman, was working on called Bodacious, and it's based on a real bucking bull that was unrideable. Like so many people were thrown from this bull, and nobody could ride Bodacious. And Eddie Murphy came up with an idea about let's do a movie about Bodacious, but he's like this bull. He's like a champion bull. They retire him. He goes out to pasture. He keeps, he goes on speed dating with all these heifers, and then one day, he starts having babies, but they're all girls, and he's wanting a bull. And finally, he gets that one bull, but the bull isn't really that interested in being a bucking bull. He wants to dance because he saw one of the halftime shows, with all the dogs, the monkeys on their back and everything like that. And so Adam said, well, I want you to go over to Eddie's house. And I was like, Eddie Murphy's house? You're gonna have a great time. Just talk to him about this animated movie. So I remember going over and talking to Eddie, and we didn't really talk about the movie at all because he had seen Hustle and he really liked Hustle, but he had a guitar in his hand the whole time, and he was just playing. And so we just got to talking about music and musicians, and that was how we kind of connected. So then when my agent called me a couple of years later and said, do you know who Rudy Ray Moore is? And I was like, yeah, I know who Rudy Ray Moore is. I've watched Dolomite and Human Tornado and, Disco Godfather. And, I collect vinyl. So I had a lot of those records that Rudy did back in the day. And he said, well, Larry Karaszewski and Scott Alexander, who, great writing team, who's done like Ed Wood and People versus Larry Flint. Well, I became good friends with Larry Karaszewski here in Memphis because he would come to our film festival here. So I was like, look, I'm interested. If this is an offer that's going out there to the world of directors, just know that I know how to do this movie. And so met with Eddie and everybody, and we got to get going. But where the rubber hits the road is like, can you work together? There's great meetings and there's great lunches that you can have with an actor, but it's really about can you work with them? And luckily, I think I had just been put through such a arduous couple of years working on Empire. I'd done 10 episodes of Empire, and I felt kind of strong, like I was cut out of wood to kind of deal with any scenario at all. And Eddie and I just had a good way of communicating. I keep things very, very light on my sets. I play music, and usually it's a lot of soul music and a lot of rhythm and blues. And he really loved all that. And it was coming out of that movie that he was like, let's do Coming to America. And that's where we are.
So whenever, obviously it's Eddie Murphy, and even with working with Dolomite, and then as popular as Coming to America is, did you feel any pressure with this film coming to the sequel Coming to America to try to recapture any of that 1983, 1988 film, where it's so like you're touching on base there, you know what I'm saying? Like the film is very iconic, right? And you're coming and you're making a follow-up to that film. Was there any pressure in your field, in your shoes, taking on that role?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that part of what gets you the gig is knowing that you could make a great movie, and it doesn't matter. Someone's not going to like that you did it. I will never forget this moment. Well, I haven't thought about this in a long time. It was when my first movie was going the film festival circuit. And this is before Hustle and Flow. This is a movie I made here in Memphis called The Poor and Hungry. And one of the judges at the St. Louis Film Festival was James Gunn.
Oh, wow.
And this was obviously way before Guardians. I think he had just maybe written Scooby-Doo, but I knew him through his work with like Tromeo and Juliet and like, you know, some of his like early kind of more delightfully vulgar stuff. And he was just a great guy. Cool back then, he's cool now. But I was in the elevator with him. And we were all kind of hanging out and drinking, you know, the judges and the filmmakers, because the St. Louis Film Festival, they choose like 6 filmmakers as like the new filmmakers that are coming out. They just show those 6 films. That's it. And then they make kind of a big thing around it with the judges and everything. But it's kind of like this party. And I'm in the elevator with him, and he goes, and he just got to the phone, and he's just like, damn it. And I was like, well, what's going on? And he goes, well, you know, they want me to do Dawn of the Dead. It was Dawn, right? Wait, is that which one did he write? I think it was Dawn. Is that the one that Zach directed? Am I getting my night with Dawn?
Yeah.
Because they want me to do it. They want me to write it. And
yeah, Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, he goes, I know every one of my friends is going to give me shit about it. Everyone is going to say, you can't redo that. You know, it's precious. Even movies that are kind of guerrilla, like low budget or flawed, people love those movies and they don't want to ever see them reinterpreted or anything. And I was like, well, what do you got? We're in the elevator. It's just like the two of us. And I go, well, what are you going to do about that? And he goes, well, I think I need to do it. And I couldn't help it. I was like one of those guys going like, I don't know if you can do that. You know what I mean? Like that's some sacred ground. But he said something that really stayed with me. And it stayed with me when I was like thinking about doing, when Paramount wanted me to redo Footloose and everything. He was like, they're going to make it no matter what. I think that I should be a part of it because I love it. Mm-hmm. And I think that I could perhaps care for it and make it as good as I can make it and not just think of it just as a paycheck. And I'll never forget being in a theater watching Dawn of the Dead and that whole amazing opening that the movie had.
I loved it.
I was the only one that kind of like, did it? You know, I was like, he did it. You know, he's totally rocking this movie, you know? And so there's always that kind of intense pressure on anybody. The one person I've been wanting to talk to, and I know you guys are probably thinking like, well, of course you're going to want to talk to him, but like, I've been really interested to talk to J Abrams about his whole Star Wars, Star Trek experience, because you just inherit baggage that isn't even yours. You know, it's part of the franchise or it's part of the story, and it's hard to you can't just say that every single decision that's made is JJ's. You know what I mean? And yet at the same time, if there's anything to blame, then it's going to be like laid on him. If there's anything to praise, it's probably going to be given to him. But for something like Coming to America, I remember, you know, Jody Williams, who was the director of photography on it. We worked together on Empire. I remember we were on a bus, you know, just going around to different locations. And we finally talked about just exactly what you just said. Like, how are we going to deal with this pressure? And he goes, I know, man. And he goes, it's Black Star Wars. And I was like, it is Black Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think he.
It's all right.
Oh. Are you guys there?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you see?
Yep. We lost you for a second.
Froze up for a brief moment.
No, you're fine.
I don't know.
That's why they made editing, right?
Yep.
Right.
All
right.
about that.
Where did I freeze?
Black Star Wars.
My new movie that's coming out. 2022.
Starring Terrence Howard, Eddie Murphy, and
Right.
Oh.
You know, he said it's Black Star Wars, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It comes with all this love and all this worry of whether or not we're going to mess it up. So every day we were aware of it, but we didn't let it stop us because kind of what James Gunn said. Like I had tremendous love for the first movie. All those movies, you know, early, you know, from the early 80s on, especially John Landis movies. You know, Blues Brothers was a really big, important movie to me. Trading Places, you know, the musical rhythms of those movies and how music is used had a big influence on me, you know. And so I wanted to see if I could do some of the same things. It's a little tricky these days. Not all of the kind of humor that was in 1988 completely works, as much as you can watch that movie and laugh your ass off, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a modern audience is gonna be down with everything. So we were kind of always on this, like, I remember having these conversations about like the comedic curve of, like, on one end of it is like Airplane, you know, where things can be so arch and so over the top, but that's part of what works with it. But then you kind of like move through the spectrum, and I would say that like Anchorman's in there, you know what I mean? Like, and then eventually you're going to start getting into like Judd Apatow, which is like, well, no, it's just friends talking. I mean, it's not like it's kind of like over the top, but maybe the scenarios might be a little bit here and there. And then moving into, you know, comedies that are just more adult fare, like Woody Allen and so forth, like things that are just going to have to be a little bit more cerebral. And so it was just like trying to find out, like, well, where does Coming to America in 2021 land, you know, and where people are going to be. But I will say that the one thing that saved us with every question and decision was, on the day, things were just hilarious. But there's also a lot of heart that we had to service with the movie, because people are emotional about Coming to America. Mm-hmm. You know, it means a lot to them, and we wanted to make sure that we serviced that as well. That we wanted people to actually be somewhat moved watching the movie, because you can tire from jokes after a good 30 minutes, and then you need something to hang your hat on a little bit more to get involved.
Absolutely. So you got the phone call in August, or prior to August, I'm assuming, that the film was going to be transitioned from being shown in theaters for the most part, and it was purchased by Amazon. What was that like for you? Did that kind of change your perspective on anything? Obviously, I mean, the movie's probably already shot, it's already done and stuff like that, but how was your reaction to that?
It's such a roller coaster ride, because I had to edit all of Coming to America remotely, which means I'd be on a Zoom call like this with my editor. I couldn't even be in the same room with her. And so it was it's a very difficult, long process where there was probably about like a dozen movies that were in this zone of supposed to be coming out, but dealing with COVID and trying to figure out how to move forward. You know, there was West Side Story, there's Bond, you know, Wonder Woman was one of those movies. You know, it just, there was a lot of them that had been in various stages, and we began to hear from one another. It's like, wait, did Top Gun get to test with an audience? Oh, it did. Oh, good. Oh, wait a minute. How the hell are we going to test a comedy when we can't even put 300 people in the room? And even if we did put people in the room, one person's way over on that side of the theater, one person's on this side of the theater. So it's very hard to test. So with all of the learning curve of trying to make it work and make it happen, we finally got to a place where it was really good, and it was testing well, and people were enjoying it. And then it was like kind of the bummer started to set in of like, okay, but when? Because more and more movies started to get kicked down the curb a little bit. You know, it's like, all right, well, summer movies will go to Christmas. And then like we started getting closer to Christmas, and it's like, well, no, there's not really going to be a Christmas. And so how about Christmas moves to summer of next year? So when the Amazon offer came in, it was a little bittersweet, because I don't know, I've always wanted to, I'll admit to this, I've always wanted to have like a blockbuster, you know what I mean? I've never quite had one. You know, I've had movies that have had, you know, really great runs and everything, but I've never had that thing where it's like everybody in America on the opening weekends going out to see Coming to America, right?
Yeah.
And it was, we filmed it to be an experience for everybody who loves Coming to America to be in a theater and laughing and being infected by the people around them and laughing and shouting at the screen. Like I love movie. I live in Memphis. This is how we consume movies. We get involved. We bring the kids, even if it's an inappropriate movie. I mean, it's not a tame affair, right?
It's a party.
So it's a party. That's what you go to the movie theaters for. Some people don't like to go to movie theaters because of that party. I like it to be that kind of a party, So to know that wasn't going to happen bummed me out. But then something started to happen that really changed my mind on it, which was a lot of people started reaching out to me saying how grateful that they were that it was coming out on Amazon. Because as much as there's people like us that love to go to movie theaters and love, a wide range of films and like to go to the theater to experience those films, then there's the rest of the world, which they just want to be entertained and they want to be engaged with whatever type of movie it is, but they want to see it. They want access to it. And a lot of people were telling me that they really needed it. That there hasn't been like a good, fun, comedic, let's see some old faces that we haven't seen in a long time movie. And my attitude about it coming out shifted, where it's like, well, wait a minute, this now means grandma, mom, my kids, like everybody could experience it now and not be into this weird thing of like, okay, are we gonna do we mask up? Are we going to this theater that'll allow like 20% capacity and everything? Everybody could just get together who's part of their bubble.
Yeah.
Watch Coming to America on Tuesday night. Watch Coming to America Wednesday night. Like it's like, I can contribute to some of the things that I've been experiencing. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've kind of enjoyed when a new movie comes out on a streaming service while I've been in the quarantine world to some extent. I mean, like, I don't know if I would have ever seen that Kevin Costner, Diane Lane movie, Let Him Go.
Fantastic movie.
It was so good, right?
Yes. Leslie Manville she still scares me. I think she's still
She's so wonderful in the movie. I don't think I would have gone to a theater to have seen it under normal circumstances, but it was something new. I called over like my father-in-law. I got the grown-ups together. We got popcorn and we watched this movie. And I'm finding that I'm doing it now a lot more. And I think there's a lot of questions as to what that's going to mean to movies going forward. I'm not a poo-pooer on it because I think, there's a lot of advantages to the fact that on March 5th, Coming to America will be playing to millions of people globally, all at the same time, and that's something that is unique, especially in the world we're in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's so important, and it might not be that money blockbuster that you wanted, but it is kind of important that like you said, millions of people are going to be seeing it kind of on the day of. It should be a big party for everyone who kind of needs it in this moment. And Coming to America is great, but speaking of kind of your breakout, I would say Hustle and Flow, how did that kind of story come to be, and how did that movie start its rise up into what became a very well received on almost every level film?
Well, it's an interesting story with Hustle and Flow because it's it is one of those rare situations where what the movie was about was kind of like how he made the film. Mm-hmm. I moved here to Memphis. I was working at Barnes and Noble, and I was writing scripts at this bar here in Memphis called the P&H Cafe. Mm-hmm. Till late at night, and I wrote my first movie, and I sent it off to my dad, who was always like a really big supporter of me, and and he really loved the script. It was called The Poor and Hungry, and it was about car thieves in Memphis falling in love with this one car thief who fell in love with one of his victims, and she was a cello player, and so it had a lot of classical music in it. But my dad died suddenly. Like it was, he wasn't sick or anything. He never had any health problems, and he's my age now. So I am now 49, and it's on my mind, gentlemen.
Mhm.
It's on my mind. But I got about $20,000 of inheritance from my mom to use how I wanted to use, and she encouraged me to maybe make that movie that my dad had read. So at the time, my wife, we had her brother and sister were living with us, and we were in this like kind of like rundown house in Memphis, and we were making that movie by hook or crook. We were editing it in our little house, and uh, making our own lights, and getting local strippers and prostitutes and car thieves and musicians and rappers and city officials to all be in this movie, and we wanted it to be a meaningful movie. So when we made the movie, it won the Hollywood Film Festival, and Stephanie Elaine was a big champion of it. She saw the movie, but then she asked, like, well, what do you have next? And I was like, well, I've actually written a sequel to Poor and Hungry. The ampersands were really big in this whole idea, and it's Hustle and Flow, and it was going to take place in the same world as the kind of the Memphis underworld to some extent, but it's a little bit too dark than what I mean. But it's like people who probably do crime, but I don't sensationalize it all that much. I try to make it more tedious and more normal, right?
Mhm.
And focus on other things with it. And so the movie really, Hustle and Flow, was about me making that first film and that first movie. Even down to it, there's a scene in the movie where Terrence Howard has his gold watch. And that was my dad's watch that he got for 25 years working in shipping. It was on him when he died, and I wear it all the time. And so it was a very personal. Hustle was a very personal story, but nobody wanted to do it. They loved it. They loved the script. They didn't. They were worried about the pimp of it all. And I tried to explain to them all. It's like I really don't want to do a pimp the way I've seen it in movies. I don't want him covered in silks, rings, and walk with a cane, all that kind of stuff. I want it to be a little bit more like the pimps that I've known, which they're a little bit more pathetic. They're driving ladies from different clubs, and it's not as appealing or sexy as Superfly makes it. And and the person who got that and understood it was John Singleton when he got it. And where a lot of people had problems with me being white with it, John did not. John was very big on regional filmmaking. He believed that he was not a black filmmaker. Yes, he was a black filmmaker. Yes, he can tell you everything about African American cinema history and everything. But he really believed he was a South Central filmmaker. He believed that the rhythm, the music, the culture, the characters that he was surrounded himself with is what made his storytelling. And he believed, he saw my first movie. He knew where I lived. He came to visit me. He saw how I rolled, and he was like, this cat should do it, and he put his house up for collateral with the bank, and he raised about $2 million of his own money. And we made Hustle and Flow, and then it sold at Sundance. And so, it was, we were hoping just to get like a Walmart DVD deal. Like we were hoping that Hustle would just be that thing that you could walk into a Walmart and get alongside of Diary of a Mad Black Woman and various other DVD combos, but then Sundance happened, and then the Academy Awards happened, and it went in a different way. And now I find that it's just on television so much.
Mhm.
I mean, it's really great to see people commenting on Twitter like, "Oh, I saw Hustle for the first time the other day," and people are like, "First time? Haven't you seen Hustle and Flow?" So it's really been the little engine that could.
Mhm.
I mean, I everybody that was involved in that movie, from Terrence Howard and Taraji Henson. I mean, the other day I was seeing Luda do it. I was seeing Ludacris doing something. I was like, man, I remember us talking to Ludacris to be in that movie for the first time. And it's a wild experience that's got us here, but there was a lot of love that went into making the movie.
Mhm. And that actually transitions right into my next question. Speaking of the Academy Awards, they got pushed back this year. They're going to be in a few months. But of course, Hustle and Flow got nominated for 2, and the big one was 3 6 Mafia winning their Oscar, which prompted probably one of my most iconic quotes of all time from Jon Stewart, where he said, "For those of you keeping it at home, 3 6 Mafia 1, Martin Scorsese 0." What was that moment for you? I mean, were you in attendance? Were you just watching it? And then also, like, on top of that, how did 3 6, get to be a part of the movie?
Well, luckily, 3 6 Mafia had already done some. I'll never forget. When I brought up 3 6 Mafia to John Singleton, he's like, "Oh yeah, man, we'll get Juicy and Paul involved." I was like, "Oh, you know who 3 6 Mafia is?" And he's like, I'll never forget what he said. "Oh yeah, we've made money together." I was like, "What did you make money with?" and so we got this artist, a really great rapper in Memphis named LaChat, as well as Gangsta Boo, and they've been part of that Hypnotized Mind camp, along with Lord Infamous and Kupsa Nika and the Frazier Boy, Lil White. There was this group that Juicy and Paul all kind of put together and made a bunch of albums with these artists through Selecto Hits, which is a local distributor here in Memphis that used to do church music and like country, and then suddenly became the place to go to do rap. So they had a very Memphis experience. They pivoted in a big way. But John, there's this really great story where John flew into Memphis, and I was going to take him over to Juicy and Paul's, but I heard that Juicy was going to give me a call, and then I get a phone call. He's like, "What's up, man?" And so I start talking to him about the movie. And I was like, "So did John tell you about it?" "No, man, I'm just calling." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird. He told me he talked to you about it." "No, John Singleton?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "No, I haven't talked to John Singleton." And then it dawned on me, and I'm not proud of this moment, that I wasn't talking to Juicy. My friend Al Capone, who's another rapper, had called. And he had heard that I was doing this rap movie. And so I was like, "Oh, Al, I'm sorry. I totally thought you were Juicy J of 3 6 Mafia. You got to forgive me." And he goes, "Hey, man, if I could just have one shot." So literally, while I picked up John at the airport, and while I'm driving him to Hypnotized Mind Camp, I pull over into this studio, and I was like, "I want you to meet my friend Al Capone." And Al Capone started playing music, and John really loved it. And one of the songs was "Whoop That Trick." But at the time, John asked him, "How did this song come about?" And he goes, "Well, it used to be called Beat That Bitch, but I was worried that people were going to think that I was talking about a woman, when this is a Tear the Club Up song where you're telling the guys on the other side of the crowd, hey, beat that bitch." And so I changed it to "Whoop That Trick" because I didn't want people to get confused. And John's mind just was blown. He was like, "You got to put that in the script. It's like Terrence has got to start off saying it this way, and then they got to get him into the whoop that trick mode." So anyway, he buys like 3 songs off of Al right there, all three of which appeared in the movie, which is "Whoop That Trick" and then "It Ain't Over for Me," which is like the 3rd song that DJ sings. And then Al Capone also has a song called "Get Crunk" that's over the Crystal Palace skating rink parking lot scene with all the cars. right? So we
Awesome.
drive over to Juicy J's place, and Juicy knew that John didn't want to pay him a lot of money for what we were calling the Pimp Song, and it was like a song that no one knew yet. We just knew we needed a song about a pimp writing, and Juicy was all like, "And it's too bad you guys aren't gonna like mess with me on that Pimp Song." And John's like, "Hey man, it's just business, you know." And Juicy goes, "Yeah, but let me play something for you." Juicy plays the beat right there of "Hard Out Here for a Pimp," and pulls out a napkin from Neely's Barbecue, and there's lyrics written on it, and he sings the hook right there. You know, it's hard out here for a pimp. Does the whole hook, and I see John like listening to this song. And I know what he said. He's like, "We got to have this song. This is it." And Juicy was like, "Yeah, but you got to get down in your pocket, man. You got to get down to the sock, you know, do some business." And so then I go into one room with Fraser Boy, and I'm telling him the plot of the movie. And he literally throws a bag of weed in front of me, and he guts a cigar and takes out his pen, and he's like, "You crumble, all right," you know. And so there I am, you know, kind of helping him roll a blunt as he writes an Academy Award winning song, right? So in the next room, like Terrence and Taraji are recording the very song that we're writing.
Oh
and I go into this one room, and John is on one side of the room with his sidekick, you know, this old T-Mobile thing they had, and Juicy was on his BlackBerry. And they were talking about what strip club they were going to go to that night. And then suddenly, like, there'd be a bing, and Juicy would be like, "Oh, man, you going to screw me on ringtones? You want my paper on ringtones?" And John's like, "Man, just make an offer. Just make it." and then Juicy would be like, "Oh, okay. How about that, John? Pick up." "Yeah, okay. All right, we'll do that." They were doing the deal.
I love the negotiation happening on the phone. They're not verbalizing.
I was like, this is the most Memphis thing I've ever been a part of. This is like, so I mean, you had the hustle of Juicy going like, "Here's a song." You had Fraser in here writing the lyrics, you know, while we're getting blazed. You got Terrence and Taraji in the next room singing it in this not fancy studio at all. It was a little thrown together, but this little thrown together studio produced some of the greatest rap music out of Memphis, right? And there's John and Juicy doing a negotiation over their devices while discussing which shake joint to attend that night, and then it wins an Academy Award. But I remember when the nominations were announced, it said "Hard Out Here for a Pimp" for Hustle and Flow, and I knew right then we'd win it.
Oh, absolutely.
I was like, if we got nominated, we won it, because there were too many screenings I went to where little blue-haired old ladies were like, "You know, it's hard out here." Because I think that if you just are part of the movie and you watch something being created, it becomes yours. You may not be into rap. Just like I wasn't when I was 13, I wasn't into classical music. But when I saw Amadeus for the first time, like I radically changed my opinion on classical music, because I was watching how he was in layers making that music. So if you see somebody in a film being passionate about something and working towards something, it just becomes a worm in your head. You can't get that out of your head. So I knew we'd won it once we were nominated.
Yeah. Well, what about that night? You know, what was going through your mind, like hearing that you had just directed a song that had won an Academy Award? You know, like what was that feeling for you?
You know, it was a real special night, because somebody who passed away last couple of years, named Brad Gray, and Brad Gray used to be the chairman. I believe that's the right title. Maybe not. The head guy at Paramount, and he's the one that really bought Hustle and Flow, and he had tickets for him and him plus one to attend the Academy Awards, like row 10. You know. And I remember him giving me tickets, saying like, we wouldn't be at the Academy Awards if it wasn't for Hustle and Flow, and why don't you just take my tickets? And it was just this really special night of even Terrence like looking at me at the party going like, can you believe we're here? Can you believe that this is, Terrence, his career was not, at the place really where it was after Hustle and Flow. And we're still really good friends. I mean, when I would direct on Empire, I remember the first time I directed on Empire, he started giving me shit about something and I started giving him shit back. And then we started like arguing and yelling at each other, and the crew didn't know what to do because this is Terrence Howard. This is his show. and I go back to the video shouting something at him, and we're not like that. I mean, we anyway. And then Terrence sees the whole crew and he goes, "Oh, y'all, listen. I need to make an announcement here. This is my brother, Craig, and this is how we do it. There's a lot of love here, so don't anybody get afraid. We're cool."
Oh, that's awesome. So you mentioned Let Him Go. What are some other films that you recently watched that you enjoyed?
Oh crap! What's the name of that? Oh, that Carey Mulligan movie is so good.
Promising Young Woman.
Oh yes,
Promising Young Woman's like
yes,
wildly good. It deserves any accolade that's coming its way. What was that other film that I just watched? I like News of the World.
Okay.
I think it's going to be different from what people are expecting. It reminded me more of kind of like a Jimmy Stewart Western from back in the day. Yeah. I have been watching some really good TV. I got to be honest, like I was on the phone the other night with Lee Daniels, and he turned me on to a show that I got to be honest, I didn't think that I would like. It's on HBO Max, but it's Veneno.
I haven't heard of it. I will.
Neither
now.
did I, guys. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, but then I found it, and it's basically a miniseries based off the true life of this trans prostitute in Spain that became kind of a television sensation, and it's her life and her whole arc, and it's the most epic thing I've ever seen. I'm watching it and just like I don't know how they did some of what they did in there. I was like, because Lee recommended it, I'm gonna watch episode 1. Cut to, I am just like glued. I'm emotional. I'm crying at the end of episodes, and I guess that's just what's so great about entertainment is here's a movie or a show, excuse me, that is not my experience. I am not someone who's transitioned or been in a world of prostitution on the streets of Spain, and yet I see, when you experience just raw humanity, sometimes you can't help but just have empathy, and you now are connected to a world that you never would have given the time of day in your normal day to day, and that's what's beautiful about cinema in general is the whole notion that you're just in this dark theater or you're in your home and there's no real judgment. Like no one's right there with you going like, are you crying over that? Are you relating to that? It happens to me all the time where I'll see a movie and just go like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm this guy or this woman or this old woman. Like why would you have any sort of connection to like an 80-year-old woman? But what she's saying is speaking to something that's in me right now and that I'm dealing with. And that's just that's why I think that movies and television like that, or those kind of stories, are just never going to go away. The conveyor belt may change of how we get it and how we experience these stories, but those stories are never going to go away.
Yeah, for me, like the connection, like I watched The Father with Anthony Hopkins, and it's a brilliant film. I've never been through anything that he went through this entire film, and the way Zeller told a story, you can't help but like start saying, oh my God, like what if I was in Olivia Colman's shoes? How would I handle that situation? How would I, you start putting yourself, and then as you're doing that, as everything starts to transpire, you start getting emotional, and it's like, now you are Olivia Colman, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, you're this person, and it's like, you just start breaking down, and then by the end of the movie you're crying, and it's like, I don't even know what happened, but I went down this rabbit hole and I couldn't get out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I during the pandemic, it's also been fun to take my my 12-year-old daughter and show her movies that I think that she would like. Like, you know what holds up? Ghost. I forgot how damn entertaining Ghost is. It's got everything. It's got action. It's got comedy. You cry in it. Like it's kind of one of those things that once somebody new sees it, just like they're not the same. Like they just absolutely love it. But we did watch a new movie that was on. Well, I don't know if it's new, but have you guys seen I Am Mother?
It's the one with oh my god, man.
Hilary Swank is in it, but it's like a kind of a sci-fi movie about a girl being raised by a robot.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's good. I liked it.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Well, I guess the transition actually from that would go to what are some films that you would recommend, future filmmakers to watch? What are some films that you watch to kind of take from those and try to put it into your own films? It could be anytime, just some of your, I guess, favorite movies.
Well, I do have favorite movies that, I can't escape. They're everybody's favorite movies, like Vertigo and Kane and Godfather and, all those. But there's other movies that I sometimes tell people to watch when they want to be a filmmaker. And at the top of the list is the movie that inspired me. And I'm not talking about Raiders. When I was trying to make my movie, The Poor and Hungry, I'd listened to a lot of people, and one of the things that they were saying is like, well, you got to get the best camera, like get a really good. This is back in like 1998, so we're dealing with like not even digital technology, just like real high end like Beta. Right. And I got with a professional cameraman. He's a very talented guy, but he had an enormous camera. He had a jib and he had track. You could put the jib on and move the camera. And I was like, wow, like I don't have any of this and let's use it for my movie about car thieves, in Memphis, Tennessee. And what I learned was that the cameras don't make the movie. Whenever somebody has filmed a new movie and they've come up to me, it's maybe their first, and they go, "You got to see my first movie. We filmed it on the red." I immediately am suspicious. Like I immediately know this is not going to be a pleasing movie when they lead with what camera they shot it on, because I've been there. I had that big expensive camera and some sort of life was not happening. So my father had just passed away, as I told you. And I got this money and I decided I was going to go to Washington, DC and hang out with my two best friends that I grew up with. And they wanted to go see a movie that night. And they were talking about this movie called The Celebration. And it was directed by Thomas Vinterberg. And it was probably either the first or second movie in what was referred to as the Dogma 95 movement. And there was a poster outside the theater that explained what the Dogma 95 movement was. And what it was like, I don't know if you guys remember this time in cinema, but like all these Danish filmmakers got together and said that they were getting tired of the way movies were starting to all look the same and feel the same. And they made these rules, this Dogma 95 set of rules that they wrote on a bar napkin. And one of the rules was like, the director cannot be credited. You can't use a tripod or dollies or anything like that. You can't bring in lights. You can augment existing lights. You can't use any score. You can use music that's there. If there's a piano, you can use that. You can't do genre movies because if you shoot somebody, well, they're dead. You know, they're going to be shot. You know, so I'm reading this, and I'm like, why would anybody do this? Why would they do this to themselves? This is just ridiculous. And so I begrudgingly go into this movie about a family reunion that's happening. And it's shot on a 1-chip video camcorder. And I had a 3-chip beta camera with a jib, and I had track. So to this movie, like I'm already like, I'm walking in with attitude.
Right.
But then I see this movie that floors me, that like made me laugh and gave me chills. And I came to the end of it, and I was just like, I had my first like real punch to the face epiphany that I'm shooting my movie wrong.
Wow.
And I went home and I politely fired the cameraman, and I never used a jib until Black Snake Moan. I got a small video camera, and I started lighting it myself with existing bulbs, and my life changed after this movie. So I always tell people, try to find this movie, because I remember when at Cannes, I think Spielberg was asked what his favorite movie of the year was, and he said it's this movie, The Celebration. And it's because he knows. It's like you remove all the tools. Can you tell a story? You know, and it's a great movie. So I would start there. I would say I'm a big believer in seeing people's first films. I really love El Mariachi, and I of course read Robert Rodriguez's book on Rebel Without a Crew. I'm a big believer in the movie called Mate Juan by John Sayles. And then I can't say enough for African American cinema, which I think is some of the best cinema in the world. Because I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Claudine with James Earl Jones and Diane Carroll, but it's an amazing family movie. I love Spike's early movies, like, you know, She's Gotta Have It, but I especially loved Crooklyn. I thought Crooklyn was just like a masterful movie about like how, just a family in a neighborhood and the dynamics. So I try to steer people away from the big ones, movie nerds that want to make movies. I say that respectfully as one of them, but you grow up and you're like, man, I'm into the Matrix. I want to make the Matrix. And I was like, okay, yeah, but have you seen Bound? Have you seen the movie that the Wachowskis tried to do to see if they could get the job to do the Matrix? Like, no, I haven't seen that. Then they come back, they're like, oh my God, Bound is incredible. It's like, yeah, but Bound was made for like kind of like one location, it had this kind of a budget. Try to find movies where the budget constraints and the opportunity constraints are really, really, small and constricting. And did they make a movie that stayed with you in spite of that? Those are the movies to be watching. Those are the movies to be learning from, because once you get out there and you start making your own movies, that's when, and it never stops. I mean, don't think that just budget suddenly makes you stop thinking about these things, or like making movies like Coming to America. Like I can't tell you, the more money and the more cast that you're getting, you're having to compromise and come up with so many ways to fix things or to do things that are much more reminiscent to my early days when I had nothing than it would be to thinking that, like, well, now you can just have anything you want.
Thank you so much for your time, Craig, today. I am just in awe of your time today. I really am. Like I said, Hustle and Flow is one of those first films for me that was like, I want to create art. I want to create this type of filmmaking. And it had an impact on me. Like, I listened to the soundtrack consistently, and I can't wait to see Coming to America March 5th on Amazon. Everybody please watch it. And thank you so much for your time today.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on here.